Please subscribe my YouTube channel, Global Reality Network.
Ancient Rome presented itself as a civilization of law, order, and discipline. But behind this image was a justice system designed not to protect people, but to control them. Roman punishments were never only about crime. They were about power. The goal was to make examples so brutal that fear would prevent others from even thinking of rebellion. Law in Rome depended heavily on status. A wealthy citizen lived under different rules than a slave, prisoner, or foreigner. Equality did not exist. Punishment was scaled according to how valuable your life was to the state. Public suffering was intentional. Rome believed punishment should be seen, remembered, and feared. Pain was a message broadcast to the masses. Trials were short. Mercy was rare. Once condemned, a person's body no longer belonged to them. It belonged to the empire. Many punishments were carefully designed to erase dignity before life itself ended. Some were so cruel that later Roman writers avoided describing them at all. Understanding Roman punishment means understanding Roman control. Stability was not achieved through kindness or justice, but through terror made routine. For millions, survival meant obedience. For those who disobeyed, Rome offered punishments far worse than death. One of the most terrifying Roman punishments was damnatio ad bestias, condemnation to wild animals. Victims were sent into massive arenas where trained beasts waited. Lions, leopards, bears, and even starving dogs were used. This was not random violence. It was carefully staged terror. Prisoners were often tied, wounded, or dressed in costumes to reenact myths before being killed. Death was slow, chaotic, and public. This punishment was usually reserved for slaves, rebels, criminals, and early Christians. Roman citizens were rarely subjected to it. The crowd watched as fear took over the human body. Screaming, begging, and panic were part of the spectacle. Sometimes animals were hesitant, forcing guards to provoke them. The goal was not a clean execution. The goal was humiliation and horror. The arena turned suffering into entertainment and obedience into survival. To Rome, this was justice performed in daylight, a warning written in blood. Those who entered the arena were already erased socially. Their final role was to terrify the living. For many Romans, the beasts were not the most frightening part. The crowd was. Crucifixion was among the most painful punishments Rome ever created. It was designed to be slow, visible, and degrading. Victims were stripped, naked, beaten, and forced to carry parts of the cross to the execution site. They were then nailed or tied to wooden beams and left to hang for days. Death did not come quickly. Breathing became agony. Muscles cramped. Insects fed on open wounds. Crucifixion was reserved for slaves, traitors, and rebels. Roman citizens were usually spared because the punishment was considered too shameful. Bodies were left on display after death, often denied burial. This was deliberate. Rome wanted families and communities to see what defiance led to. The true horror of crucifixion was psychological. Victims knew death was coming, but not when they watched crowds pass by, mocking or ignoring them. Survival instincts fought against unbearable pain. Some begged to be killed. Others lost consciousness repeatedly before finally dying. Rome understood that fear lasted longer than memory. Crucifixion was not just execution. It was a lesson carved into the landscape, a message saying resistance would be slow, painful, and unforgettable. Pornacule, the penalty of the sack, was one of Rome's strangest and most disturbing punishments. It was reserved for parricide, the killing of one's parent. The condemned was sewn into a leather sack along with live animals, commonly a dog, a snake, a rooster, and a monkey. The sack was then thrown into a river. This punishment was deeply symbolic. Romans believed parricide violated the natural order of the universe. The animals represented chaos, madness, and moral corruption. Inside the sack, the condemned faced darkness, panic, drowning, suffocation, and animal attacks all at once. There was no escape, no witnesses, and no dignity. Unlike public executions, this punishment removed the victim from society entirely. It erased them physically and symbolically. The body was lost to the water. The name was meant to disappear from memory. Even Roman writers described this punishment with discomfort. It was so extreme that it was rarely used, but widely feared. Bonacule shows how Roman justice mixed superstition, symbolism, and cruelty into a single terrifying act. Condemnation to the mines was considered worse than execution. Prisoners were sent deep underground to extract stone, salt, or metal under brutal conditions. They were chained, beaten, starved, and worked until collapse. Air was toxic. Light was scarce. Injuries were untreated. Death was slow and inevitable. This punishment was often given to slaves, prisoners of war, and Christians. Unlike executions, there was no audience and no honor. Victims simply vanished. Survival beyond a few months was rare. Many died from exhaustion, lung disease, or infections. The mines were designed to erase identity. Names were replaced with numbers. Bodies became tools. Time lost meaning. For Rome, this punishment was efficient. It produced resources while quietly destroying lives. Ancient sources describe the mines as places where hope died first. Prisoners knew they would never return. The absence of records was intentional. No one was supposed to remember them. Condemnation to the mines shows Rome at its most practical and cruel. It turned punishment into profit and suffering into routine labor. Not all Roman punishments involved death. Some focused on destroying a person's honor. Public humiliation was a powerful weapon in a society obsessed with reputation. Criminals could be whipped through the streets, branded, shaved, or paraded naked while their crimes were announced to crowds. Shame was permanent. Once reputation was destroyed, recovery was almost impossible. Many victims were excluded from social life, business, and family connections. In Roman culture, honor defined identity. To lose it was to lose everything. Sometimes humiliation was combined with physical pain. Whipping was common, especially for slaves. Branding marked the body forever. These punishments ensured that even survivors carried visible reminders of their crimes. Rome understood that fear of shame could be stronger than fear of death. A person who lived in disgrace served as a walking warning. Public humiliation allowed Rome to punish without killing, while still breaking the individual completely. For many, suicide became the final escape from a life no longer worth living. Slaves lived under constant threat. Roman law allowed extreme punishment with little oversight. One of the most terrifying practices was collective punishment. If a slave killed their master, every slave in that household could be executed, regardless of guilt. Men, women, and children all paid the price. The logic was fear. Rome believed that shared terror prevented rebellion. Individual innocence did not matter. The message was clear. One act of defiance would destroy everyone. Slaves could also be tortured for testimony, something illegal for citizens. Pain was seen as a tool for truth. Masters often used punishment casually, knowing the law favored them. These practices reveal how deeply fear was woven into Roman society. Slaves were not just controlled physically, but psychologically. Survival depended on silence and obedience. Collective punishment ensured that even thoughts of resistance were dangerous. It was one of Rome's most effective and cruel systems of control. As centuries passed, Rome tried to soften its image. Later emperors reduced public cruelty. Christianity introduced new moral limits. Writers avoided detailed descriptions of earlier punishments. Some penalties disappeared from legal texts entirely. This was not because they never happened, but because they were uncomfortable. Rome wanted to be remembered for law, culture, and empire, not terror. Forgetting was intentional, but these punishments reveal the truth behind Roman stability. Order was maintained through fear. Peace was enforced through suffering. Millions paid the price so the empire could endure. Remembering these punishments is not about shock. It is about honesty. Great civilizations are not built only on ideas and architecture, but on human cost. Rome's forgotten punishments remind us that cruelty can hide behind civilization, and that sometimes death was the most merciful outcome Rome allowed.